Hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of the LeanTossup CDL Picks and Bets podcast. I am joined, as always, by my guest Ryan of CDL Metrics. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I am doing good. Very excited. We're one day away from ranked play coming to Vanguard, so I will be grinding that pretty much all weekend and the weekend after. And yeah, we have more COD. It's the last week of qualifying matches for the first major, so we'll get to see where teams fall in that bracket. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It should be a good weekend of matches.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to ranked play in Vanguard too. I bought it over Christmas. Haven't really gotten a chance to play it much. Mostly just waiting for ranked play. But yeah, it's I'm excited for ranked play. That was the best part of Cold War for me. I didn't play a ton of public matches. Ranked play was always really fun. And I think if you want the most fun, if you're listening to this podcast and you play Call of Duty, so like if you're not just listening to this podcast to get amazing betting tips, but if you play Call of Duty and you bet on Call of Duty, you're gonna get your most fun out of ranked play because it's basically you're playing what you watch every week. So yeah, so let's talk a little bit about last week. Um, there was Last week was a little chalky. As we talk, and we kind of thought that too, right? We said it was going to be a little chalky. We were expecting a bit more of a chalky matchup. But there was also some surprising upsets. Um, for one, Minnesota almost upset Seattle. That would have been a pretty impressive upset. When we were kind of on Seattle there. Florida almost upset the Thieves. We were on that one. We liked Florida. We had them on the spread. Um, Florida lost to Toronto 3-0, but that probably it was you could make an argument 3-0 the other way. LAG beat London. I think that was kind of an upset, but we were on LAG for that one too. Um, New York got destroyed. What are your thoughts on this? What was the thing you found the most surprising last weekend? Is it just how far New York has fallen? Is it Florida's resilience? Seattle? What was the thing that caught you? What's the big takeaway you have from last weekend?
I would say it was a pretty good, at least with the way I saw things playing out, it was pretty drastic in terms of matches going kind of exactly how I thought they would, and matches going kind of exactly not how I thought they would go. Um, yeah, you just run through them like Paris, they looked bad all weekend. That's not much of a surprise. Yeah, Seattle, Minnesota, that first match on Friday was really exciting. Another, game five, round 11 for Minnesota. This time they don't pull it out. Seattle stays undefeated. So that was probably the most exciting match of the weekend overall. And then, yeah, the whole New York situation kind of played out how I thought it would. Although, so last week, right, Royalty subs in for Neptune. We talked about how that New York team on such short notice might look pretty bad in their first match, especially against a good team like the Thieves. And overall, they didn't look great. I was surprised they won the search and destroy game two. We talked a little bit about how the sub might affect things, and we said like, the search and destroy might look bad, but they might be competitive in those respawn games. But it was kind of the other way around. Royalty was playing from Canada on a really high ping compared to the other guys who were in the States. So that was obviously a weird matchup. London come out hot again and take care of Minnesota, and then the next day lose to LAG. But I will say the LAG thing wasn't super surprising. They did get 3-0'd by Toronto earlier that weekend, but again, a super close 3-0. So to come out and beat London, again, that was in four matches or four games, but again, really close overall. Yeah, Toronto went 6-0 on the weekend, but honestly could have lost all of those maps. Granted, they played with a substitute on Sunday because Cammy wasn't feeling well. So a little bit of weirdness with roster shuffling and just like the matches, being relatively quick for the most part, but the maps themselves were all kind of a grind. So a lot of series that could have gone either way. I think most of it played out how we maybe expected it to. So maybe this week it kind of comes around the other way, and we see some more upsets and stuff like that right before the major. So we'll see how it plays out. I am super excited to figure out where these teams are going to fall in terms of winners bracket, losers bracket. For sure, some teams have solidified themselves in winners bracket, like FaZe, Seattle, London. Those teams are all 3-0 or 3-1. And then you got Paris down at the bottom, 0-4. New York 0-3 with a couple more tricky matchups. So, but everyone else, it's a shuffle of who's going to be the 3 seed, 4 seed, 5 seed, all that stuff. So we'll get that all squared away just over the next few days.
Yeah. I think normally I'd love to do a deep dive as to who's in what, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about standings, but like there's just so much up in the air that we don't know who's gonna be in what position, and like because Optic right now they're currently in losers bracket. We did we did a deep dive on this just before we started recording, and we've determined that Optic is in the losers bracket. So for those who are unaware, if you look at the current Call of Duty League on Twitter, they posted standings, and it shows Optic in eighth place, but that's not actually following their tie-breaking procedures because their tiebreakers, they and Optic and Minnesota have the same record. By their own rules, they're supposed to apply it as the team that has, the team that has the head-to-head match. The tiebreakers go and follows. If there is a head-to-head tiebreaker, the team with the head-to-head tiebreaker wins it. So that theoretically, Optic is supposed to be above Minnesota. Minnesota's supposed to be above Optic, but they have Optic above them because they're claiming that their map win percentage is higher. So, um, again, that's a very trivial point. If Minnesota and Optic both end up as 8 and 9, probably something either. Well, actually, maybe not. Yeah, something would have gone horribly wrong for Optic if that's the final standing of the week. But again, I think that's something that'll be ironed out at the end there. But it's an interesting thing. So yeah, I mean, right now that's where the standings are. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I think we can kind of see who's going to be in the winners bracket, who isn't. Um, I think we'll talk about the subliners when we get to them. I think one of the big takeaways for me is that Paris is just not a team at this point. I think there's probably a point in time where they'll be able to take a match off of someone, and they're probably going to be good for a map win here or there. So, for example, I think the first match we'll talk about them. Um, you can get pretty good odds on them to win a. You can get the pretty good odds on them to win a map in some of their matches this week. But like outside of that, they have no slang ability in hardpoint anymore. That's completely faded. Their search is not great either, and they're good at control, specifically Gavutu control. So either one, if you're playing them, either one, you ban Gavutu control. You basically you ban Gavutu from all the map pools, which you can, or you ban Tuscan and then play them on Gavutu control to better yourself. You practice against the best, the masters of Gavutu. So I think in this case we're going to call them the Gavutu Legion. Um, but no, I mean, some interesting things, some interesting comparisons. I think what we said at the beginning of the year, and I guess we're just going to keep talking about it. It's our tier theory, right? The tier theory said there's a higher tier, which is the top three-ish teams, give or take, right? So that's Toronto, Atlanta, Seattle in some order. And then there is the bottom tier, which is currently just Paris. Maybe there's an argument Florida's in there. I would argue it's not, but some people might try to argue that. And then there's a giant middle tier, which is just everybody else. And if you get a plus price against anybody in that middle tier, you bet it. And that's worked pretty well so far. So yeah, let's get started into the games. Then we'll talk about the standings more later. So as I was just saying, first game, the Los Angeles Thieves take on the Gavitu Legion. Um, Thieves minus 2.5 plus 105. Paris Legion plus 2.5 minus 135. Thieves minus 1800 on the money line. Paris plus 775 over 3.5 minus 130 under 3.5 even. So this is again this is basically this is on Bodog. I have the Bet365 ones up. There's not a huge difference between those. Um, on this, I don't hate. Um, there's a couple things like I mean game map one hardpoint spread Thieves minus 45.5. That actually kind of seems pretty good. Um, map three Paris plus 1.5 minus 125. That looks good. I mean, here's the thing. This is a hard one to bet because we know who's going to win this map. We're not going to lay a minus 1800. For reference, you would have to bet $180 to win $10. I mean, you could do that. That's no, not $180. Sorry, 18. So $1,800. My bad. Sorry about that math. You have to lay 1.8
No, you were
thousand.
right, you were right. 180 to win 10 or 1,800 to win 100. So you
Yes.
had it.
Oh, I had it. Okay, sorry. So I'm not gonna bet $180 to win $10.
Me neither.
That seems a bit of a waste. But that being said, we could bet on the Thieves minus 45 and a half. That's actually pretty good. But the problem is that a is that a bocage? That's the thing. If it's a bocage, we're not touching that. Um, but then also map three again. Is it Gava 2? If it's Gava 2, bet that. Bet even Paris money line on like Gava 2. Um, what are your thoughts on this? Do you give Paris any chance in this game? What are your thoughts on Paris and competitive balance in general, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Paris has a chance. Listen, there's always a chance for every team. It's slim, no
And
doubt.
any given Sunday.
Yeah, exactly, or Friday in this case. But yeah, I do have Paris as the better control team, and I do think it's pretty likely they play Gavutu. Right, and now we know. I remember they were talking on the broadcast about teams winning coin flips to determine veto process and stuff. So at least for the regular season matches, coin flips determine like who gets to pick team A or team B to do the whole veto process. So, like if Paris come out and win the coin toss, that means they get to pick the control map because there's only two of them. So they'll just ban the one they don't want to play, which presumably would be Tuscan. And honestly, I think if Thieves win the coin toss, we've seen them play Tuscan 4 times. They're 1-3. We've seen them play Gavudu twice, and they're 1-1. So they probably prefer Gavudu overall, which also makes sense. I'd say the strength for the Thieves is with their AR duo. Um, and you want to play, an AR heavy map like Gavutu over Tuscan. And yeah, Paris no doubt want to play Gavutu. They're 3-1 on that and just 0-1 on Tuscan. So I do think it's pretty likely we see that map. Just for that, I think there is decent value in taking Paris to win map 3. I'm seeing about plus 180, somewhere in that range. As long as it's better than even money, like to me, that is a smart play. So if you want to take it like just do that map. If you want to do map spreads, you can, but again, be wary because if you get a Bocage map 1, right, we might have a 20-point game. That's just how it plays out. Tuscan honestly plays out kind of similarly. So that's always tricky. If you see the maps before the match is started, then go for it. But I think right now I just like the control for Paris at plus 180 or really anything north of even money is fine with me. And if you're gonna go minus 2.5 or plus 2.5 for either side, again, I'd lean Paris just because of that strength and control. You do have to lay a little bit of juice with Paris to not get swept, but I mean, we saw this exact matchup at the kickoff on day one. It was a 3-1 win for Thieves, and Paris won the control. So I think like most likely scenario, we get that same result. If Paris come out and go, you know, screw this, we're already 0-4, like this match means nothing. We're in losers bracket. Thieves have something to play for right now. They're 2-1. They'd obviously like to solidify their spot in the winners bracket by winning this. So, maybe we see Paris kind of sleepwalk through it and get 3-0'd. That's obviously on the table. They're the worst team in the league, but I think just playing the numbers, it makes sense that we might see a 3-1 for Thieves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, and I've actually really loved betting on hard point spreads in a lot of these hard point spreads. I haven't touched a lot of search spreads, but I want to get into those a little bit more. But yeah, like in a lot of cases, I haven't bet a ton of top lines, especially in the like when you have to lay something like, and again, this one is minus 135 for the plus 2.5, which I think that's okay. But when we're starting to get into some other ones, and we're about to get to some in a second here, um, when you have to lay a ton of when you have to lay a ton, it's a lot of cases it's actually just straight up better to just start picking on little individual games. So I agree with that. And actually, that is a perfect segue to the next game where we have FaZe taking on the Minnesota Rocker. FaZe minus 1.5, minus 175. So this is again, you have to lay $17.50 to win 10 cents, or $10, or $175 to win $100. That's not that bad. It's when you start getting to like minus 1.5, minus 200, or minus 250. You have to like lay $250 to win $100, or $25 to win $10. That's when it starts. That's when I get a little balk a little bit, and I'm like, I throw that into parlay or something. Um, FaZe is minus 385 on the money line. Minnesota is plus 255 on the money line. Over 3.5, minus 250. Under 3.5, plus 185. This is actually a match we saw quite a few times last year. This is actually the classic revenge match for Priesta and Major Maniac. Um, I don't like. It's gonna be stupid because they're gonna screw us on this. But I'd say phase 3-0. I think you phase 3-0 is probably some value. Map one phase minus 40.5. Like some of these like this Minnesota team is really bad at hardpoint. And like FaZe almost 3-0'd Boston Breach. They arguably should have. Actually, no. Well, no, they didn't because they lost the search. FaZe. Oh, that's the issue. It's going to be search, isn't it? Hmm. Well, I'd start picking on like hardpoint spreads and some stuff like that. I wouldn't mind laying a little bit on the 3-0. I think once FaZe figures out their search and destroy, Minnesota has definitely not figured out their search and destroy. But I think once FaZe figures it out, or at least has figured it out enough to beat Minnesota, I think this team could start. This is one of the best teams in the league, and I think we're going to start seeing them pull away from when they only beat Paris 3-2. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I see this somewhat similarly as the Thieves Paris match, just in terms of how I think the final result will go. And I see a phase win 3-1 probably. And just like the first match, I do have the underdog as being the better control team. So if you're gonna make me pick anything, I would say Minnesota right now to win map 3 is about plus 140. Again, I have them favored to win that map. No matter what map it is, whether it's Gavudu or Control, they seem to do okay at both, or Gavudu or Tuscan, I should say. So yeah, I don't mind that. Do a little Paris to win Control in the first match, Minnesota to win Control in the second. If one of those comes through, you're doing okay. But yeah, hard points a big discrepancy, and this is actually one where I don't think the map spread matters a ton because even if it is Bocage or Tuscan, like Atlanta has proven that they can win big on those really tightly contested maps. Um, yeah, Atlanta's search has been a little troublesome in regards to like the standards they set themselves to, and Minnesota's has been kind of up and down as well. I have it pretty split in terms of search and destroy win percentage for these teams, about a 50-50 split. So, yeah, obviously the big difference is hard point. I think Atlanta probably win game 1 and 4, maybe take the game 2 search and drop the game 3 control. So, again, I would lean 3-1. I don't like a lot of the prices on this. Like the phase minus 1.5 is a little too pricey for me. Same thing with the money line. And honestly, for like the game one hard point, I see something like minus 400, which they should be really heavy favorites, but I might look for the hard point map spread as opposed to just doing the money line on such a big price like that. But yeah, I think two matches to start off Friday that kind of go similarly, where we see the favorite win, but the underdog at least makes things a little scrappy and doesn't get swept.
Yeah, that's a good thing. You're worried about Minnesota winning the control. I'm more worried about Minnesota winning the search. I think that's probably the bigger thing. But I think if FaZe cleans that up, I think this is a 3-0. But we'll have to see. Maybe I'll throw a little on the FaZe 3-0. I don't know. And probably I think the minus 1.5 is pretty good too. Obviously, stack your bets a little bit so that it's like you get a lot of the 3-1, and if you get a 3-1, and then if you get the 3-0, then you get it a little bit better, and then bet some individual spreads in there. But yeah, I think there's some really good ways to make some money on that match, even if there's a blowout, right? Because I think this Minnesota team is just really struggling, and I don't know. I think the fun thing will be if they, because right now they're actually the underdog in their other match too. I think it would be hilarious if FaZe crushes them, and then they win their last game against LAG, which I think that'd be kind of hilarious. And we'll get to that later. But I think I'm gonna maybe actually take them in that match. But anyway, moving on to the last match we have on Friday night game. Toronto versus Optic Texas. Toronto minus 1.5 plus 115. Optic Texas plus 1.5 minus 150. Toronto minus 200 on the money line. Optic Texas plus 150. So Optic, after losing their first match in the kickoff classic, they then lost their next two matches to Minnesota and London, who are better than we think they were now at that point, right? I mean, except for Minnesota, right? We thought London was pretty good. They underperformed, then they did well. Minnesota, people thought they were horrible. They're not horrible, but they're not amazing. So after losing three straight matches, the last two in Game Fives, they then turn around and 3-0'd the worst team in the league, Paris. I'm sold. Where do I put my money on Optic? No, I mean seriously though, like this is a massive overreaction. There's clearly value on Toronto minus 1.5. My model prices the minus 1.5 is even, so it's about right, but you're still getting 20 or so points of value on that. I've got Toronto favored. I've actually got Optic favored in the control, but then by game four, Toronto should clean it off with the should be able to clean it out with the hard point. Game one hard points, it's pretty close though. I like no, I'm fully on Toronto here. Looking at some of the spreads, map one Toronto minus 15. If that's not a bocage, that's pretty attractive. If that I'm not sure if Optic plays Gavitu anymore, but if that's Gavitu or if that's a anything else really, if that's a Berlin 100%.
Berlin,
Yeah,
yeah.
minus 15.5 looks really attractive there. Um, and then on the search, like Optic search was really bad. That was not fun at all. Minus 1.5 on the search. I actually really like that as well. Again, so Toronto, like they were massive favorites against Florida. Then it was announced the day of that Cammy was sick and Cammy was sick and that they were going to bring their substitute Hixie in, and that was actually really cool. So they announced that, and then the price dropped. The price on the minus 1.5 crashed. They were down to minus 200 on the money line. I grabbed the minus 1.5 at plus 100, and I also parlayed Toronto to beat them. I also parlayed that with the LA Rams to win the Super Bowl, and that happened. So that was a nice little catch I got there. But no, I don't. I like Toronto here minus 1.5. Again, we're assuming Cammy's okay. I mean, here's the thing: could he have just gotten like a just food poisoning? What I suspect is this more or less is like Cammy got like food poisoning or something. Now again, we don't know. I'm not going to speculate. Usually, I don't speculate as something horrible, but probably the most likely outcome here or something. Again, we haven't heard any announcement. Is that Cammy got like food poisoning or something, and that the team itself trusts they trust Hixie enough that they're like, yeah, sure, come in. We'll take down Florida. It's fine, right? And I think that's actually a pretty good. I think the fact that like because we've seen people play through sickness, right? Like we saw Hydra near death playing once, and
Exactly.
like I don't know exactly what happened to Cammy, but like I think that on some level, unless Cammy was literally dying, which again we have no evidence that he is or wasn't, unless Cammy was completely because the thing is you have to remember that Hixie is right there in Toronto with them. He's in the same facility, right? So if any of them just don't feel well someday, and again, it was against Florida, they were pretty confident about that match. So honestly, if there was no issue with them just getting Hixie the start, I don't think I think that was kind of what happened. I don't think Cammy was like near death. I think they were just kind of like, yeah, sure, let's see what Hixie can do. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that them almost the 3-0 the 3-0 that could have been a 3-0 the other way? Do you think that was do you think that's indicative of this Toronto team, or do you think that maybe this Toronto team is as good as like the best? Like, does this is still Toronto still the best team in the league, or do you think that that result makes them a little worse? What do you think?
Yeah, I so going into last week, I did have Toronto as the number one team, despite their loss to the Surge in their regular season match. And going into this week, I still have Toronto as the number one team, despite like they did go 3-0 in both their matches last week, but they were by razor thin margins. Seattle, similarly, they did only play once last week, but it was a 3-2 win. It went to a game five, round 11. Super close against a Minnesota team that we think is probably back half of the pack, but okay. So both teams, similar results in that they were narrow victories with tight maps. Um, so I really don't see them moving too much. I will say Optic, yes, they beat Paris, who are the worst team in the league, but they did exactly what we needed to see from them. They dominated every map. The Bocage went to time, which a lot are going to, but they still ended up winning by 60 plus points. They took care of the Berlin Search 6-3 and won control on Tuscan 3-1. So much improved from Optic. Let's see it against a good team now. Um, but yeah, I think the price, at least for this match, I like Toronto on, even though they're still decently heavy favorites. I do think, yeah, Texas is just getting a little more love, just based off of their last, showing. Looked really good. But yeah, I mean, Toronto's still the best or second best team in the league, and Texas just needs to prove that still. Um, the -1.5 I have going to Toronto about 54% of the time. So again, it's plus 115 I see. So that's pretty good value. Again, as long as you're getting over even money on a lot of these, you're doing okay. Um, yeah, the one area of concern I'd say is control. Optics, one decent mode, and again, we've talked about this with the other two matches. At least from the way I see things, is that the underdog has a really good shot at control. And we may see that stick throughout the year again if tie-breaking round goes to whoever has the most kills. I do think that favors, worse teams, like underdog type teams, because you can kind of just play for kills, and if we're playing team deathmatch, like the underdog can win that more times than not. So, control Texas could get one on, but yeah, their surge has been troublesome. They're dead last in the league in first blood percentage. Um, Even worse than Paris, believe it or not. Yeah, Optics first blood percentage win rate is 37.3%, which is just really bad. Toronto has been a little disappointing as well. They're only at 44.7%. But yeah, I just got to believe Toronto's the better search team. So far, they've been a better hardpoint team, and I even do give them a slight edge in control for what I've said about Texas being good at it. I do still think Toronto's better. So although I do have Toronto better at them in every mode, again, I see a 3-1. I think we have 3-1s up and down the board on Friday, um, coming from those favorited teams. Yeah, if Optic's gonna win this, they're gonna need to pull something out. They're gonna need to probably win a Berlin hardpoint, which they've looked really bad on. Um, the coin flip probably is gonna have to go their way. They have yet to play Gavudu Control, interestingly enough. Optic, that is. And Toronto has only played it once. So maybe if you're Optic and you win the coin toss, even though you have more reps on Tuscan and you've looked good on it, maybe throw a curveball out there and give them Gavutu, because Toronto's look good on both maps despite the only having played once on Gavutu. So again, if you're Optic, I think you got to be creative with the vetoes, with your strats, because Toronto are maybe the most creative team in the league when it comes to that stuff. So you've got to counter that in some way. But yeah, I do think the price on Texas has just gone a little bit out the door with their last performance. You know, it's their first win of the year. People are excited about that. Now they want to get on Texas. But I would just say hold your horse. You got a tough opponent coming up in Toronto, and maybe another tricky one later this weekend as well.
Yeah, I think yeah, I agree with that. I like again, this Toronto team is sorry, I just got an email. That's fine. came through on the sound. That's okay. No, no, I'm not completely sold on this Optic team yet. I think they've got a long way to go before I start really trusting them and putting stuff on them. Next up, we move to Saturday. Seattle Surge take on the Florida Mutineers. On Bovada, -2.5 is +150. +2.5 is -200 for Florida. Seattle Surge -650 on the money line. Florida +400. Over 3.5 -175. Under 3.5 +135. Now, here's the thing, and if you look at my model, I've got this as a pretty well. I've got Seattle. I actually don't find a ton of. I actually think Seattle's a bit undervalued on the money line. It's about. I mean, there's not a huge difference between -650 and the -900 that I have. Um, but I like I don't see a huge like I see some value definitely in like the problem with this Florida team is they've really had a bunch of bad bounces. Right? I mean, they lose the hard point to the Bocage hard point to Toronto by a point in just an insane hard point that in Bocage is such an insane map that it just completely destroys all known rules of how hard points are supposed to go. They do that. Then they lose the search 6-5. And they lose a control 3-1. And then Florida against Thieves last week, they get blown out in both the hard points. And then they win the search, which great, good for them. Win the control, they hold on a 3-2 in a control, get blown out in the game 4 hard point. They were actually very close in the game 1 hard point. They actually had a lead in that for quite a while. Probably could have pulled it off, but then in game 5 they just fall apart and Thieves take it to win the match 3-2. And again against Toronto, that was a 3-0 that could have been a 3-0 the other way. With again literally second like any 1 second left, any 1 second either way in that hard point could have flipped it, or vice versa in terms of the search again around and the control again. Control rules of control are just really bad. I know that no model will back me up on this, and I don't think the model's not going to say there's value on this Florida team, but there's value on this Florida team. I think this Florida team could upset Surge this week. And again, we've talked about the tier theory and that Seattle's one of the top tier teams and Florida's one of the bottom tier teams. I get that. The middle tier teams, bottom of the middle tier. But like this Florida team they're really competitive in all these games. And the problem with my model, at least, I'll speak to my model. I'll let you maybe elaborate on your model and how your model differentiates between games. But the problem is, so when Seattle was taken to a game 5 by Minnesota last week. Now, generally, that wasn't good for them. Their elo value, their elo points dropped a little bit after that happened. But then Minnesota, after taking them to a game 5, turned around and immediately got blown out by London and just outslayed crazy. Minnesota like took the fight to Seattle, and then Minnesota got destroyed. The issue here is that if when the model is built now, it when Minnesota dropped after getting destroyed by London, that same drop didn't apply to Seattle as well because it doesn't account for it. So Seattle didn't drop any points after they beat Minnesota, but because of that, they've now fallen like they haven't moved at all since then, right? So the model is basically what I'm saying here is that the model is overvaluing Seattle and that there is probably going to be some value on Seattle this week. So I think it's really interesting of what we can do here, and I think we might be. I think there might be some value on this Florida team. I bet on this Florida team when they were +400 against Thieves. Did not regret that at all. I'm definitely thinking of running it back against Seattle here this week. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I will say my model also does like Seattle, like, by the slimmest of margins, uh, and I don't hate it. The thing is, it's just the prices are tough, and I do think we're gonna see a bounce back from Florida. We talk about how, like, with betting, you can see stock price fluctuations. Right now, right, you're picking Seattle at their highest value. Like, they've been perfect in the group stage so far. They've been one of the most talked about teams throughout the year, including the kickoff classic. Um, I do think it eventually their luck runs out a little bit, and I do think Florida's turns around. Like you said, a lot of their bounces aren't going their way. Um, I don't. It's tough. This is a really tough one for me to figure out. Seattle, they're 5-0 in round 11 so far this year. You think that's got to correct itself at some point, but at the same time, They're a top 4 team in first blood percentage. Florida is a bottom 3 team in that same category. Hard points for Seattle, it's maybe their weakest game mode, but for Florida, that hasn't been great. There's not really a thing Florida can bank on really. Every match it seems like is going to be a fight, and control especially has been troublesome for them. Just 2-4 on the year when including the kickoff classic. Yeah, I think obviously again, most common scenario, you're gonna get a Seattle 3-1, maybe a 3-0 if Florida just comes out really slow. But yeah, there's something telling me that like this Florida team is gonna bounce back in a major way somehow. Maybe it's not right now versus Seattle, maybe it's at the first major or whatnot. But yeah, I gotta think they'll come up for this match. Is their last match of the stage before the brackets lock in for that first major. So they're going to throw it all out there, try to improve the 2 and 3. Hopefully that's good enough for them to not start in losers bracket. But I think in all likelihood we do see a Florida loss. I don't know. I might stay away from this game completely because Seattle does want to lock up the number 1 seed overall. If Atlanta wins and beats Minnesota, right, that's more motivation to do that. So it's tough. I do think brighter days are ahead for Florida. Um, I don't know if it's now because Seattle is it's just that team I don't want to step in front of right now. So it's a hard pass for me. If the prices fluctuate a lot before game time, I might consider it. Like if Florida somehow gets up to plus 450, plus 500, maybe I'll really start to consider it then. But um, yeah, they're just a tough team to figure out as they were last year too.
Yeah, I mean their price could definitely move if they get to like plus 450, plus 200. I think you got to put something on that. Interestingly enough, if you look at the map spreads, um, I'm seeing Surge minus 25.5 in map one, which is really, really low. My model definitely has value on Seattle and a hard point, so I'd consider that. That would be something I consider. But again, if it's a bocage, right, you don't bet that. I don't know. I like this. I agree that this Florida team is better days are ahead for them. I think that maybe it's now, and I think the best part is that like I'm trying to think of. I love making comparisons to NFL teams, and one hit me today for Florida. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I think they're the Atlanta Falcons. I think if that makes sense to you, do you think they're the Atlanta Falcons of the CDL?
Can see it. Now Atlanta, yeah, I remember last season they were a bad team that kept winning games. I kind of get the volatility aspect of it, where like Atlanta have the talent to beat anyone. Atlanta Falcons, that is, have the talent to beat anyone. But so often we see them just flop. So I get it from that perspective. But yeah, I don't know. Comparing CDL teams to NFL teams is like a fun exercise. It can be very tricky though.
It can be. We'll have to do that going forward. I think we're gonna have to. I know some of them are super easy, but I have some takes on some of them. I think one of the ones that I know for sure is Paris is the Houston Texans of the CDL.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
not the Jaguars. They're the Texans. There's a very specific badness to the Texans that other organizations don't have, and that's why they're the Texans. Moving on, Saturday afternoon. Sorry, Subliners versus Boston Breach. Subliners, new look roster with Royalty, who's a Canadian player for all those listening to from Canada. I'm coming to you from Canada, not too far from Saga, which if you look at his Twitter handle, Saga Royalty. I believe that's a reference to Mississauga, which is a city in the GTM, about an hour or so away from that city. Subliners plus 1.5 minus 170. Boston Breach minus 1.5 plus 130. Subliners plus 165. Boston minus 220 on the money line. Looking at this, so I actually have this as like I have this as a Boston 3-2. But looking at these spreads, like map one Boston minus 9.5. That's insanely high. Like that's insanely low. Like I might just bet that right now while you talk. Like these seem like this is like a really really high value watermark for for this subliners team. I mean, they could pull it off 100%, but like I don't know. Like this team had to face Thieves last week. They did pretty well, and I get there's some value. Well, like I even have the -1.5 at +153. So if you're getting +130 on that for Boston, that's not bad. I don't know. I think the subliners team bounces back. I just don't know if it's this week. Um, I think maybe I mean they're not. You have another whole week to practice with royalty, so that's good. I think there's going to be a lot said about did royalty fix the problem or not. I think that's going to be the issue. The thing is, what is that's going to be said is like, oh, did royalty fix it or not? And like, is he fixing the issue? A lot's going to be said about that. I don't think that's really the issue here. I think it's just, does this team have more time to practice? I don't know. What do you think about this? Are you on? I'm maybe seeing some value in Boston minus something. I don't know. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, tricky. This honestly, both subliners matches might be stayaways for me because I like is royalty gonna play from Canada or wherever he is? He's not with the team, I don't think. So if his ping is gonna be like in the 80s or 90s every match, like that's a serious problem. Like I did New York not consider that like they can play with Neptune in the same location and royalty they can't? Because although he might be a better player, like if your internet is going to be that drastically different, like it's going to be a huge burden. So I understand why Boston are pretty heavy favorites in this. My model likes New York just because it's always like New York. These teams played kickoff. New York did win in a 3-2. And my model does include kickoff classic data when New York looked half decent. But yeah, since then it's been kind of the opposite. Obviously, New York are 0-3 in group play so far. Um, yeah, this is tough. This is tough. I can see it both ways. And yeah, Boston's been trending up. New York has not been. I just think it can swing back the other way. But unless I know more about royalty and his internet situation and all that, like these New York games, I just can't. I can't pick. I don't know. I think Boston will win. Um, if you're gonna make me pick a map count, I'll say yeah, 3-2 makes a lot of sense. Um, because I think both teams honestly are pretty close. You know, hard point, search and destroy, and control. I think they're pretty back and forth, where we might just get a scenario where teams just win their own map picks and it comes down to control. Um, yeah, so if you have a lean on Boston, I'm okay with it. If you want to sprinkle a little on New York, thinking they might bounce back, I'm okay with it. But just be wary that like if New York are playing with someone who has an 80 or 90 plus ping, like that can cause serious issues, especially on a map like Bocage. We saw New York play Bocage against Thieves. And yeah, if your ping is that bad on a map like that, like it could be a nightmare. Royalty did not look good in that match. And I don't want to chalk it up as all internet, but like, man, when when you're playing pros and you have that much of a disadvantage, it can make things really tricky. So that might explain why they had a little more success in the search and destroy, excuse me. It's a little slower. You can team coordinate a little better, but again, the team chemistry, I don't know if it's there yet after a week. Um, yeah, it's tough. Honestly, I can see this going any way possible. Like, yeah. Could New York come out in 3-0? I mean, I don't think it's likely, but sure, but like a Boston 3-0 wouldn't shock me at all if New York just kind of says, "You know what? We're in losers bracket. Let's just keep our strats to ourselves for the next two matches. After this Boston match, they get Atlanta for the final match of the qualifiers. They might just not want to show anything and go, listen, we'll take this to LAN. We'll make a little losers bracket run, see what we can do, and then consider things. And I do think Boston, right? If you win this match, you're pretty much guaranteed that winners bracket spot, sitting at 3-1. So again, it's a stay away from me. I could talk about this match all day just because of how unpredictable I think it could be.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't know. Like I came into this fully expecting to want to bet on subliners, but I'm just not seeing a number I really like. Like plus 165, eh, okay. Minus one and a half plus like plus one and a half plus 170, eh, I don't love that either. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
if
really
if nothing's jumping off the page, then, I mean, yeah, just leave it or look to the other side.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
again, Boston is a public team, right? We could get this. I don't think this line has moved a lot, right? We could get to Friday afternoon or maybe even Saturday. Like by Saturday morning, that line they could drag that line out, right? That could be minus 300 on the money line. That could get up to plus. Maybe that can get to a plus 200, plus one, like even on the plus one and a half, right? So, um, that I probably feel much more open to taking Minnesota there, subliners there. Sorry. Um, Moving on to the next match we have here, we have Minnesota Rocker versus LAG. Minnesota plus 1.5 minus 170. LAG minus 1.5 plus 130. Minnesota plus 115 on the money line. LAG minus 150 on the money line. Over 4.5 plus 160. Under 4.5 minus 210. So this is a very interesting match. It opened even. It opened up minus 115, minus 115. I checked during the Super Bowl for the lines, and the very interesting thing about that is that, and you can kind of even see it here a little bit. So basically, at minus 150, minus 115, this is basically moved only a little bit from where it started at in terms of opening lines. But basically, the minus 1.5 on LAG was always more expensive than the minus 1.5 for Minnesota. Now, there's a very good reason for that. But it basically states that they're fully pricing in teams being different on hard point. Because like before, a lot of the times you just kind of see it flat throughout, right? Like you'd see like okay, they're both relatively equal for a minus 1.5 each way, but now they're fully pricing in that LAG is better at hard point. And like look, get map one LAG minus minus 190, map two Minnesota minus 138, right? So they're fully pricing in that LAG should be winning the hard points and Minnesota should be winning the search and destroys. This is kind of iffy to me. I was like, when I first grabbed this, I was like, I badly wanted to bet LAG. I was like, oh, minus 120, I should grab that. Probably should have grabbed it. I want to get a better price. And I kind of think that, I kind of think this price isn't bad, but I'm actually, in this case now, I'm looking more towards Minnesota here. I'm actually thinking maybe Minnesota pulls this off. I mean, if Minnesota wins game two, and then they win game three, because if there's a control, then all of a sudden, then they're guaranteed a game five. So at that point, then at most, all they have to do is win one of two hard points, right? Which is definitely not impossible, right? They can win a hard point. They won a hard point against Seattle. That's a better hard point team than London. They came relatively close against London in the second one. I think it was the second one was closer than the first one. I think but they just couldn't pull it back. They couldn't pull it out. But then you go to game five, they're favored in the search, right? So I don't hate the minus 115, and I'm actually kind of at the point now where if Minnesota loses to phase, that price probably goes up to, especially if Minnesota loses to phase 3-0 or like 3-1, that price goes up to plus 150. Then you bet Minnesota, maybe you even get like maybe you get like a minus 120 on the plus 1.5 or something, and that's maybe not horrible. LAG is not as good as a team as London, right? London beat Minnesota 3-1, but LAG is definitely worse than London. Well, even though LAG just beat Minnesota, like London, like I think LAG isn't a bad team. I'm just not on them right now. I think that longer term, I probably will be. I think they're going to be one of my picks in the major for like a huge run. Like if they play, like I think actually now that was a great time to bring the standings in here. One second, let's find Call of Duty League on Twitter here. Let me just call it up here for 1 second. I'll call it up. I'll look at the standings here, but um, this is basically a place where we could be looking at. We could definitely, yeah, okay. So right now, LAG is actually seventh. So they right now would be playing Surge, because they have two wins, right? So right now they're actually in winners bracket. This could be Minnesota's like last chance to get into the winners bracket. So like I don't hate the idea of picking up of betting Minnesota there to get them in the winners bracket, and then have LAG go on a super long losers bracket. Because if they're ninth and their first match will be against Florida, cool, they could smash Florida. Or no, sorry, it won't be against Florida. Actually, it'll be against the loser of a different match. It'll be the loser against the winners bracket match. So then they could beat them, and then they can just keep like they could probably go 2 3 rounds deep into the tournament. I think. What are your thoughts? Are you on LAG here? Do you think they're just straight up a better team? Minnesota crumbling. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, this is priced about right. I do have LAG as the better team, but I'm not in love with the -150 on the money line. And honestly, I thought I would like the -1.5 plus 130, but I am not in love with that either. This is a rare match where I actually see a little more value in the over 4.5 maps. That's sitting at plus 160. I just think we have pretty drastic differences with certain game modes. Obviously, LAG is a really good hardpoint team, um, and Minnesota is not. So you could see LAG take map 1 and maybe map 4. And then control wise, I think Minnesota have proven they're a solid control team at the very least, and LAG has really struggled in that mode. And the search and destroys I have is pretty close. Minnesota a slight edge. So I think if Minnesota pulls it out, it's probably in a map 5 where they win both searches and take the control. But if LAG wins it, I can see it probably finishing up in 4 maps, maybe 5 if Minnesota does steal a hard point or that first search. So yeah, it's a tough one. It's obviously hugely important in terms of seeding because in all likelihood we'll have a Minnesota team that's at 1-3, facing off against an LAG team that's 2-2. Where if the head-to-head tiebreaker is the tiebreaker that matters, that could determine who's in like the 8 seed and who's in the 9 seed, and that's winners bracket versus losers bracket. So yeah, a really really important game. Yeah, if you're gonna make me make a pick, I will probably take like LAG map 1, maybe against the spread in map 1, or honestly, yeah, the over 4.5 maps I don't hate. Honestly, I think we'll see another long series. I think Minnesota's gonna have a lot of those this year, um, and I think LAG, at least right now, the best way to bet them, I think, is as an underdog you take them like minus a map and a half because if their hard point is on that day, you only need them to win that game 2 or game 3, and there's your upset. It's exactly the layout we saw against the London just on Sunday. They won in 4 when everyone was kind of counting them out, just because we knew London was such a hot team. But yeah, if LAG comes out guns a blazing, like this team is kind of scary in hard point. So um, yeah, for me, I don't know if I'm going to do anything with this unless there's some drastic line movement one way or the other. I lean LAG slightly, but it's not something I love like the like some of the Friday games. So
Yeah, so my model actually does have odds um for over maps, and I've got over 4.5 maps is 39.5%. So that's not bad. That's
right on the money. Yeah, that's about right on, I think.
yeah,
Because I've
that's
I've got it at about 42%. So plus 160 if that's what you're getting. That's about a net even, maybe a little bit of value, but yeah.
I do kind of agree though with the idea that like for LAG the -1.5 is about the money line. You'll get burned, but to be fair, if there's an underdog, right, you can just take the money line because the money line will be like you could take the money line and the things like when LAG plays into their team, they'll probably be like an underdog, so you can take like the -1.5 and the money line too. So like you can get like maybe +200 on the money line and then like +350 on the -1.5 or something. But like they're probably catching on to that though. Like these are starting to get priced appropriately now. So
That's
that
true. One
is
other thing one
yeah.
other thing I will say with LAG, just real quick. I know we think of Minnesota as probably the superior search and destroy team. First blood win percentage, which I think matters a lot. LAG, despite not winning a lot of rounds of search and destroy, they do rank third in the league in first blood win percentage. So if they can convert on those more, I think we see an improvement in that mode. Their hard point is obviously very good so far. Their control needs some work. If they tweak a couple things here and there, like they could be a really scary team, as crazy as that might sound, where they just took London 3-1. Like, it wouldn't shock me if they go up against a FaZe, against a Seattle, and maybe do the same thing. It's just, the inconsistency is definitely there too, specifically with the players they have. Like, ASIM can pop off on a map, but he could also go, double negative. Like, there's a lot of volatility with some of the players on that team. Minnesota might be a little more consistent. So, yeah, it's going to be a great series. I'm really excited to watch that one. And yeah, again, right now the lean is LAG. If Minnesota's going to go to a map 5 in like every one of their matches, like, good luck trying to figure out if they're going to win or not. If they do have the ice and can win a lot of those, good for them. But I mean, they got to correct some stuff in hardpoint and maybe tweak control a little bit too before I have a ton of confidence in them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's the issue. I don't like the price in this game right now, but if Minnesota loses to FaZe, I'm gonna put something on Minnesota here. I think that's the idea, and I don't know. Even then, like the spread is still only like plus 22. Like the thing is when they played London, like was Minnesota just really off that day because they were able to keep the hard points a lot closer against Seattle even. Right? So I'm gonna rewatch those matches and just see what happens. Maybe London got lucky in a lot of different matchups, right? So I'm gonna keep it on. I'm gonna rewatch those games. Don't have much time to rewatch them, but I'm definitely gonna take a look at that in the next couple days, and I'll see. Thieves versus Ultra, right? LA Thieves play Toronto Ultra on the Saturday night game that I cap. Which, by the way, I just want to make one quick point. So much better when we have 4 games on a day than when we
Yes.
have two. That's so much like four instead of the three. Like the Friday, Saturday, four games each. That was great. Now, unfortunately, then meant that Sunday had no games. Um, but yeah, it's gonna be sad. That being said, though, when the major comes up in 2 weeks, I did quick back of the envelope calculation. There are 18 matches. 18 matches spread over 4 days. So that means that on every day, there's going to be at least 4 games. And that
Yeah.
assumes no replay in the for the finals, right? So I have no idea. No one's announced yet if it's a best of nine with a one game advantage to the team from winners bracket, a best of five, and then a re bracket best of five. I have no idea. So we're gonna have to see. I'd love it. I'd love if they just fixed it to a re-bracket, but we'll know soon. When the pick'ems thing comes out, we'll be able to figure it out. We're gonna game that out, and I'm gonna hopefully have odds for my model. I know you will have odds for your model. But anyway, 4 games much better than 3 games. Anyways, Thieves versus Ultra. Thieves plus 1.5 minus 170. Ultra minus 1.5 plus 130. Thieves plus 145 on the money line. Ultra minus 190. Over 4.5 plus 150. Under 4.5 minus 200. This is another game I bet early in the Super Bowl, but I pulled it, and um I bet this game. I bet the Optic game. I bet it at minus 110. When you bet on Bet365, you can cash out your bet. So I bet it at minus 110. By the time I woke up on Monday, it had already come down to even. So I pulled it, lost $1. I'll live. I'll reinvest it later, and now it's already up to plus 110, plus 115 here on Bodog. So back here for this game. This game opened at minus 110. I bet it, pulled it on that one. It's actually still minus 110 on Bet365, but it's up to plus 130 on Bodog. So I'll probably just bet it here then. I liked Ultra minus 1.5. Now, again, there's concerns here. I have this as an Ultra 3-1. The problem here is, I have it 3-1, but I have a lot of like really close games. So I have the Thieves winning game 1 by 50 points because Toronto has been weak on a lot of game 1 hard points. I have Ultra dominating in the search. I have Ultra winning the control 3-1. That would be an interesting control. And then I have game 4. I have Thieves winning that 250-248, which should lead to a game 5, which then Toronto wins 6-3. But it's interesting to me that I I think my model is basically saying Toronto has non-zero chances to win either game 1 or 4, and they'll win one of those, and then in that case, that's when you get your 3-1. Because I've got this basically even as a 3-1, as a Toronto minus 1.5. I got this basically even. I'll take it because the thing of it is Toronto's played a lot of bocage game ones, and it's dragging down their average. They've played a lot of bocages, and they've played a lot of surprisingly close hardpoint game ones, which is dragging down their points in my model. the Thieves, like, sure, they beat um the subliners 3-1, but then they really struggled against Florida. And although Florida put up more of a fight on a Bocage against Toronto than they did against the Thieves, that was with the sub, right? So like I think these teams are pretty evenly matched at hardpoint. If Toronto wins either one game one or game four, you cash a plus 130. I like that a lot. I also think that yeah, right now map one you're seeing Toronto plus 13.5 on the spread. Map four you're seeing a plus 13.5. I don't hate those hardpoint spreads either, especially if game one is a bocage. I think you can get there's some very clear value in that. So yeah, I'm taking Toronto here. What do you think?
Yeah, I would lean Toronto. I do think this is maybe a wait and see match. Thieves should take care of business against Paris. Toronto have what is a somewhat tricky match against Optic in their first one. If Toronto falters, and their price drops, and honestly, it could drop enough where this becomes a pick 'em or somewhat close to that, then I'm definitely going on Toronto as just that bounce back, that classic bounce back spot for a good team. Right now, I do still lean Toronto. With all that said, um, and I don't think like if Toronto do come out and beat Optic and Thieves do their thing against Paris, like I don't see this price moving a ton. So I think my favorite way to play it would be wait on that Optic game. If Optic impress and Toronto disappoint, come back on Toronto in this match. And yeah, I kind of agree with everything you said. Hardpoint is close. I do give a slight lean overall to the Thieves. Search and Destroy definitely goes to Toronto, and Control definitely goes to Toronto. So you add all that up, I see a Toronto 3-2, but honestly, there's not a lot of difference in likelihood that they win in 3 and 4 or in 5. So my model says they win in a sweep about 23% of the time. They win in 4 21.2% of the time, and they win in 5 maps 23.5% of the time. So it's very spread out. These teams put up a heck of a fight against each other at the kickoff. This should be another good one. All signs point to Toronto winning, but yeah, this could be really, really close. Close maps and a long series. Maybe the best one of the weekend, honestly. But yeah, I'll lean Toronto. The plus 130 is okay, but I'm I'm kind of hoping if I don't decide to make a pick on the Texas Toronto game, kind of hoping Toronto loses just so I can get a better price on them for this match. But we shall see because there's obviously a lot of COD to be played between now and this game. So
Yeah, for sure. That's the thing. And I think if Optic has this kind of like, oh, cool, we're back now, we do this, then I mean, again, they're playing the next game. We'll talk about them in a actually two games from now. We'll talk about them in a second. But yeah, if Optic does come out, like these are a team that Toronto's given them a lot of like in terms of last year. And again, it's not the same Thieves team. Obviously, you have Envoy and you have Octane now, but Toronto and again, Toronto didn't do this in the Kickoff Classic. Again, the Thieves just gave it to them on that first hard point. And then they should have won. Thieves probably should have won the event. Actually, they should have beaten Toronto on the second hard point. But I don't know. Toronto has had a habit when you look back at last year, two of the most dominant hard points for the entirety of last season where was Ultra beating Thieves once on a that was the 50-point club on raid, and I think it was a 100-point club on.
checkmate, maybe.
Yeah, I think it was checkmate. They were two of the most Yes, it was a checkmate. You're right. It was two of the most dominant hard points that happened in the entirety of the Cold War season, and it was Ultra versus Thieves. So I don't know. It's never great to bet like to look long term trends. You're like, oh, this team's never beaten this team before. Well, until this weekend. But no, I mean it's yeah. This Ultra team stacks up nicely against this Thieves team, and we'll see. I'm kind of I don't hate them. I definitely think Ultra's the play here, and yeah, like if Ultra beats Optic game one, immediately bet Ultra, start betting Ultra against the Thieves. I think because then at that point then their odds will go down. But like if Optic wins game one, so like this is how I do it too. And this is how people listening to this should be doing it. You have your sports book open up on game one. The second that first game is over between Ultra and that the first point's over. If Ultra wins that hard point, immediately bet this game. If Optic wins it, don't bet the game until like the next day. That or it's actually the day. Actually, it'll be the next day. Yeah. So bet it the next day then. That's the best way to bet these things. Um, and also too the other way too, right? Like if Thieves versus Paris, if Paris somehow wins the first game on hardpoint, they just immediately bet this ultra line. Like you have to always think about because they don't like in an NFL season, like with the NFL lines, if one team beats another team, it doesn't really affect other lines because they only play once a week. But here, like one team plays later on that weekend, so you get a preview of them. So for like a very brief window there, they don't lock down the lines. Like there's a brief window when those lines are open. So go ahead and take advantage of lines that are going to be badly priced. Like take them immediately. Um, that is it for Saturday. For Sunday, the last day of Major One. London Royal Ravens versus Seattle Surge. Ravens plus 1.5 minus 165. Seattle minus 1.5 plus 125. Ravens plus 140 on the money line. Surge minus 185. Over 4.5 plus 160. Under 4.5 minus 210. This Ravens team, man, after they crushed Minnesota, people were like, "This team's amazing." I was like, "Yes, I can't wait to bet this team to win the major." Then they lost badly to LAG in three. Um, I I am I don't I don't love this line. I think these lines are priced about right. I've got Seattle as a much bigger favorite than this. I think their minus 1.5 is I got it about even. My model has it minus 107. It's plus 125. I've got Seattle's money line is minus 400. It's minus 185. I really like Seattle here to win this game. And like if you look at hard point spreads, um, map one spread Seattle minus 1.5. Okay, that's free. Well, actually, the game itself was minus 115, so that you just take the money line at that point. But no, like I really do like the Seattle team. I think that London is possibly overvalued, but I could. That being said, I could also see Seattle winning this game. What do you think? Do you think like this is also another thing, right? Where if Florida takes the fight to Seattle, then Seattle's price goes up for this match, and then at that point, then then you can get a really good price on Seattle. Maybe you can get them at like minus 120 for the series. But no, I'm just starting to think that this like this London team might be a little bit overvalued after last week. With especially with the price we're seeing here, plus 140 against Seattle. What are you thinking here?
Maybe I maybe see things a little differently. You did say that this is priced accurately for the most part. I completely agree with that. I don't really see a lot of value in anything. Partly because it's a matchup we've seen. You know, it's two good teams going head to head. Um, and I stand corrected. I said Thieves Toronto is my favorite match of the weekend, Saturday night. I think this one's better. So I didn't see that coming, but yeah, London Seattle should be a really good one. I do have Seattle favored. I have them winning this about 60% of the time. But yeah, it's pretty close. Hard points and searches are think they'll go back and forth. It all comes down to control, and I think that's where Seattle has the definitive edge on London. But if you're gonna make me pick a price, like I think I'll take I think I'll take London plus the 140 as opposed to Seattle minus 185. But again, not something I love. The over 4.5 maps again shows a little bit of value, so that might be a fun play to do instead of picking a side. But yeah, this is going to be one heck of a match. The London again, the whole London LAG thing, I wouldn't worry too much about that. LAG have proven they're a very good hardpoint team. I think London are too. I think just LAG came out hot. They won both hardpoints, and when you win 3-1, it looks more convincing than obviously winning in like a 3-2 fashion. But London was right there. So I'm not too worried about them. Seattle did struggle a little bit as well, despite their win against Minnesota, right? It went to another game five, round 11. They're not going to win all of those this year. They will fall eventually, but yeah, I'll lean Seattle to win, but London should make this a really good series. And yeah, just map five, I don't know. Just thinking about this match in my head, I see it happening. And if it does go there, again, I do think Seattle takes it. I do have them as the slightly better search team, but yeah, it's a tough one. It's probably just a stay away for me, where I just sit back and enjoy it.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I don't see value, so I don't love it on this line. But if Seattle goes down, if they lose to Florida or Florida keeps it close and they go down a touch, I'd jump on Seattle here. Um, I
That
think
I don't hate. The wait and see strategy, if Seattle falters, come back on them. That I totally get. But yeah, taking it right now, it's tough for me to go either way.
yeah, that makes sense. I just yeah, I think looking at it now it's not great, but I think you could get some value in this in the future. I do like London long term. I think they're probably one of the better teams in the CDL. I just don't know if they have that experience yet. Also, I think there's a huge problem with them on Gavitu because that was the first map they played against LAG. And when I was sitting there waiting for the prep, I'm like, okay, well, Gavitu is like a 3 AR map. Who's the other AR on London? And they just got blown out. And I think London definitely has a problem with because like I think that's why Gavitu is such a is a map that some teams just can't play. And I think even like I think FaZe is like okay to play it because they got RCD and they got Celium. I think Toronto could definitely play it because you could throw Insight and Cammy on an AR. You probably need another one too, but and like some teams are better at playing it than others, which is probably why Paris is okay with it because they can throw a bunch of people on ARs. But some teams like Optic and even um, to a lesser extent, even Thieves are okay with it. But like there's some teams that really struggle on Gavitu, and I think that might have been one of the reasons why London lost it. So not necessarily a strength on the Gorillas part, but more a weakness on LAG's part, on
I
London's part.
will say it was not a blow. You referred to it as blowout as an 8-point loss, and then
Oh,
they
that's right.
lose
Yeah,
the
it was.
search and destroy in around 11. Like London could have 3-0'd that series. It went the other
Mm,
way, and I think a lot of people have this like preconceived notion that Gavudu is the blowout map. That has not been the case so far. Gavudu has played obviously not as close as like Bocage or Tuscan, but Berlin for whatever reason is the blowout map this year. And maybe that'll correct itself and Gavudu will kind of become that blowout map where rotations just matter so much. But I disagree. I think London have three capable ARs if you want to throw, Gizmo is very, very good with whatever weapon you give him. Nasty's been comfortable on an AR, and obviously Zero's the main AR. Afro has looked good with it at times. He's kind of their main SMG right now, but yeah, I'm okay with London. The 3-1 loss to LAG, I'm not too worried about. I think people were just underrating LAG way too much in that matchup. So yeah, slow down on London. I do think they're underdogs against Seattle, no doubt. But yeah, I think it's very, very possible they can take out Seattle. Even like a three, like if they come out and 3-0 them, it wouldn't shock me. Like that's how good these teams at the top are. And that's how competitive this game can be sometimes. Like we just play such a mixy game where if you wake up on the right side of the bed that day, you might come out in 3-0 or you might get 0-3. Like it might be that kind of year. So we'll see. I'm super excited for that nonetheless.
yeah, I think so too. I think yeah, it's gonna be an interesting game. Um, Next up, second last game of the weekend, Boston Breach versus Optic. Um, we've got. Let me just call up the line here. Boston plus 1.5 minus 145. Tex Optic minus 1.5 plus 110. Boston plus 125 on the money line. Optic minus 165. My model is actually kind of breaks my model, at least currently. Now this projection won't go out on Twitter because it'll be updated before. That's the only reason why I don't post all 10 projections at once. I post the amount for the first day, second day, and it'll be those update after each match. So this one will never make it to the light of Twitter. But right now, the screen in front of me is saying Boston 2, Optic 3, Boston 50.3% chance of winning, Optic 49.6. So one, I'm going to have to go fix that, figure out why that's saying that. But anyways, um, no, I've got this as a dead even match. I've got this as both teams to win plus 100. So like it's plus 100 even both ways. I've got Optic is a better hardpoint team, and that's about it. I've got Boston as the better Search team, they take both searches, but I've got Optic as a better control team. So basically, it's like Boston wins one of the hard points, both searches, and then that's the series. There's your 3-2. I don't know. I like I kind of think Boston wins this match. And then again, if Optic does something against Toronto, then you'll see a huge outcry for then this price will go. Then Boston will be plus two, especially if Boston loses to subliners, which I think is very possible. If Boston loses to subliners and Optic holds their own against Toronto, or even if they don't, right? Even if they just lose 3-1 and Boston loses to subliners, this goes up to plus 200. I think that's when you take Boston. Like, I don't mind it at this price. I'd probably grind it out with Boston, but like I don't love it at this price. It's not a great price for me at this point, especially not at a plus 125 and a plus one like I minus 150 for the plus 1.5. I'd much rather have better prices. Plus 17.5 game one, that's not bad. I'd consider that. And for the hard point, I don't think Optics' hard point is nearly that good. Um, but yeah, I think this is a map. This is something that Boston could win. I'm actually looking at this map three. There's some value here. Okay, map three Boston plus 1.5 on a map three. It's even minus 115. Um, and then also money line for Boston on map three is plus 260. That's some value there. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. Now, I do think Optic is the best control team, but controls are basically 50-50. So I don't hate Boston there, especially not the plus 1.5 at even. That's really nice to be able to get, especially if that's just two defensive rounds. That's not bad at all. What are your thoughts on this? Are you on Boston here, or do you think this is Optic's second win? What do you think?
Yeah, boy, it's tricky. Again, this one's really priced well, I think, just like the London Seattle match. And interestingly enough, I think there's a little bit of value on Optic minus 1.5. I see it at plus 110. Um, and yeah, the minus 1.5 on that is, according to my model, about a 50-50 prop. If Optic do win this, it should be in 4 maps or less. And if Boston wins this, it probably will be in a map 5. It's maybe the most clear cut in terms of that like type of specific outcome. But it's a tough one to pick because yeah, if you give me the money line prices, I would prefer Boston's actually. So maybe there's an interesting sort of middle opportunity here where you could take um, like Optic minus a map and a half and Boston plus a map and a half. Or no, sorry, that would be horrible. Take Texas like minus a map and a half and Boston to win outright, something like that. You get plus money on both sides, and you think one of them should win. Yeah, I don't know. It's tough when the prices are this accurate. It's tough for me to have one strong lean. But I will say, if the earlier matches go how we expect, right? Texas maybe loses to Toronto, Boston beats New York. Could we see a better price on Optic? I don't know, right? Because the Optic money might come in regardless. But that might be the way I want to pick it. I just for whatever reason, my model does not like Boston that much. And I know yours does like them a little more. So I think that's where we differentiate here. Yeah, I would lean Optic with the minus a map and a half, but there's a pretty good chance I think we get a better payout if those initial matches with these teams go how they should go. Now, if Texas comes out and looks good against Toronto, and Boston, does whatever against New York, heck, if they lose or if they look okay in a win, then I think, right, regardless of what Boston does, this Optic price goes skyrocketing, and it's just gone. So it's a tough one for me to call. It's a wait and see. If Texas looks okay, competitive against Toronto, but loses, that might be the best time to buy in on them. Especially at 1-3, then they'd be. They would really need this match to vault them into winners bracket. So yeah, a battle of the green teams should be a good one. But yeah, I lean Optic just slightly.
I will say that like my model, well, you didn't accuse it, but you basically said my model is like a Boston homer. I mean, it's not. I mean, the thing is, I don't think it's my
He
model
doesn't love
likes.
them, but
Yeah,
your model's much higher on them
yeah.
than mine. Mine is very low on
I
them.
I think the issue from well, so right now my model has them ranked 6th. So like exactly middle of the pack team. I think the difference between the models is that mine just has Optic 7th. Like that's the thing. I have mine 7th spot behind them. And I think it's not that my model likes Boston that much more because my model easily called for a 3-1 phase there, and that was a beat down by phase. No, I think it's just my model is lower on Optic, and I think that's the key difference between in that case. I just don't think Optic Texas is that good. I think there are like just because you beat Paris 3-1 doesn't mean that all the issues are solved. I think this is a I think this is a toss up, and I think if you're giving me plus 150 on this on game day, I'm taking it on Boston. I don't
That's
especially
fair. I think
yeah.
it could balloon up that high. Like, I can see there being value on either side. So, yeah, it's a tough one. I do
Yeah.
think one thing with I'll say with Boston, they've been very impressive in search and destroy. First blood percentage, they've been just over 50%, but they're winning nearly 60% of the rounds that they play. So that might come down to earth a little bit. Either they will lose or win less first bloods and lose rounds, or they may not convert as well when they're not getting those first bloods. We've already talked about Texas's first bloods. They're the worst in the league. Again, I think they're a good enough team where that will correct itself and they'll improve. So if that's the case, I think Texas are the better hardpoint team. I think we start to see better search and destroys from them. And I think control they've been sneaky good at too. I just I worry that Texas has hit their low point in the year and now is the bounce back. Whereas Boston has kind of come out hot and people like that. They're a new team, they're hot, they look all right. Um, but yeah, this price obviously could fluctuate a lot between now and game time, and I think it could be the better for Texas. So if you like Boston, which it sounds like you like, I would take them now. Just on what I think might play out with them beating New York, and then Texas maybe struggling against a Toronto team that we both like. So if you like Boston, I'd go ahead and grab them now.
Well, my model has the subliners not being pretty competitive with Boston. So that's the issue, right? I don't. It's not a bad idea to pick them up now. Again, this is something where like I'm gonna be watching that. We're watching the Toronto Optic game, right? We're like, okay, this Toronto wins map one. Okay, immediately bet Toronto minus 1.5 against the even, then immediately bet Boston plus 1.5.
Yeah,
Like they're just
yeah.
immediately placed. I was like, okay, depending on who wins this map one, I'm gonna place 4 bets, and it's like that's you know what you're doing, right? That's a debate. I don't know. It's gonna depend. Like I don't know. I also don't think like I think boss like subliners could surprise like because again it's a team change. Generally, there's a honeymoon period after every team change. Been very few exceptions to that. I think that New York's time is coming, and I think that we're at a point where it'll be soon, and I think that's where we're gonna get some better value on some of this stuff. But I think for right now, I think it's not quite there yet. But I think maybe against Boston, like I would not be surprised if New York beat Boston at that point. Then you're getting an amazing price here. So but anyway, moving on to the last game of the weekend. This is the last game before before the major, which will be 2 weeks after. Phase versus subliners. Phase minus 2.5 plus 185. Subliners plus 2.5 minus 250. Phase minus 650 on the money line. Subliners plus 385. You can get slightly better prices at that. You can get plus 200 on the plus 1.5 on Bet365, plus 400 on the money line. Give me subliners here, honestly. Now my model has this as a 3-1, a pretty brutal beatdown of a 3-1 too. But again, I kind of think subliners are going to have some positive regression here. I think that they've made a team change. I think last week was bad because you just didn't have like you couldn't get any practice going with royalty. There's still as you mentioned before, right? You mentioned with the last subliners game, royalty is is basically going to be playing from Canada, so that's a potential issue. But at the same time, like I don't foresee this being like a huge issue with like I kind of think that like here's the thing, it's either FaZe wins this 3-0 or like Subliners takes it to a game 5 and wins, I think is probably the way this is gonna go. And like I just like at the way we're at right now, I think if Subliners if here's the thing, if Subliners don't put up a fight against Boston, immediately bet the two minus 2.5. If Subliners take that to a game 5 and or beat Boston, which I definitely think is also possible, Then you look at subliners here against FaZe. What do you think? Do you think this is something that we're gonna like? Is this gonna be a competitive final for for stage one, or do you think this is gonna be a blowout?
Yeah, I worry. I mean, I obviously talked a lot about the New York Boston match with my concerns about the internet, with royalty and that whole thing. Um, yeah, I just worry if that's still an issue and they come out and lose to Boston. You're sitting at 0-4 now. You know, you play FaZe last match before the major. Like, I'm just worried they're gonna turtle up a little bit, and FaZe might have the number 1 seed or number 2 seed to play for, and, um, yeah, I think that matters. I think this New York team come LAN, like we saw, at the last LAN kickoff classic, they looked solid. I think they can turn it up a notch. Everyone's playing, there's 0 ping for everybody. They are mostly a veteran team. Hydra's now in his 2nd year. And although Royalty's new, he's got some good leadership looking over him. So I know you're bullish on New York this week just based on what we saw last week. The logic makes sense, right? They didn't have any time to prepare last week. They got smoked. Now another week of practice, maybe they look a little better, and maybe they do, but I think they're really worried about, or not even worried, but they're looking forward to LAN even though they're going to be in losers bracket more likely than not. They said, okay, we need to make this team change not so we can win online matches, but to look better on LAN. So I don't know. This is a complete stay away for me for now. I think right, Atlanta are a top 3 team. New York might be turtled up. If the internet isn't an issue in their Boston match and they look competitive, then I might be willing to take them against Atlanta. And I don't think this price is going to move a ton, especially if FaZe take care of Minnesota. So that could be where I come in on them if both teams do somewhat impressive work in their first matches. Yes, then it's New York or nothing for me, but I gotta wait. I just have to wait before I make any sort of pick on this game. That's kind of how all of the Saturday, Sunday matches go for me. I want to see something before I decide on something, unless I think I make some sort of contrarian play on Friday that works into Saturday or Sunday. Um, but yeah, there's just one too many variables for me to take New York right now. But if they look okay against Boston, I think that's the time to strike.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, you always whenever you're having a team against FaZe, I think you always risk that just 3-0 blowout. But I mean, if here's the thing, especially if FaZe wins, because they're playing. Who are they playing first?
Minnesota.
They're playing Minnesota. If they 3-0 Minnesota, then this is going to be like lazy FaZe. Like, okay, just get the win FaZe. And if this, because the thing is, you also forget that the subliners, like, they're playing for their lives here. Like, they're basically guaranteed to start in losers bracket, I think. But like, if they get a little higher, I actually have no idea how the seating works from the losers from the winners bracket to the losers bracket. I have no idea at all. So that's going to be a really interesting challenge to model. But like, I have no idea if it's going to be you play a locked team or you play like a different. I don't think it's going to be like okay, the ninth team plays the loser of the first versus eight, because that would actually suck, really, right? Because you could get there and you could be the ninth ranked team, and then if the eighth team upsets the first ranked team, you could be playing the first ranked team, right? So I actually have no idea how this is going to work. So I think we're gonna have to look at like, it's gonna be interesting, right? But if subliners, I mean, I think they might have a chance to get in to the top eight. It's gonna be a really tough go of it, though. Like
Yeah,
you'd a-
they're gonna need 2 upset wins and some help. Like,
actually they
yeah,
need
'cause
Boston. They need Boston to go 0-2. If they go Boston 0-2, then they have the tiebreaker over them. If they beat them and then Boston loses to Optic, they would get over. But at that point, then you Minnesota needs to lose two straight. Florida needs to lose two straight. Then Paris would also need to lose. Actually, Paris is done anyways. But they need some chaos. You're gonna need like all that to happen, and then you're gonna need some chaos. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of important matches that are gonna happen here. But I think subliners are gonna. This is like a pride match for subliners, and FaZe may or may not be like fine tuning different maps by this point. So we'll have to see. But yeah, I think that's it for the matches. Um, yeah, I think yeah, that's it for the matches. Any other thoughts about this week? So like, what's your give me like a hot take. Who's gonna make like give me like is Florida gonna make the winners bracket? Or no, actually I think they only play one game. Um, is
They
w-
could. They could though, right? If things go crazy, like a 2 and 3 team to make winners bracket wouldn't shock me, right? Because like right now, right? If Minnesota is technically the 8 seed right now, they're 1 and 2. Like, you know, it with that many teams making winners bracket, like you're gonna have a 2 and 3 team in there somewhere. Um, hot take. Ooh, that's tough. I might say like Toronto to be the number 1 overall seed. That would need some chaos to happen. But like I can see it kind of happening. Like you would need FaZe to lose against Minnesota or New York. Seattle and London play each other, so you would need London to beat Seattle, which I think
or
is pretty possible,
or
and then
Florida to
Toronto
beat
to
Seattle.
yes. Yes. The whole thing with Toronto and Seattle though would be Seattle has the head to head on
Yeah.
Toronto. So that's the tricky thing with that. I don't know. I think hot take for the major, and maybe we'll talk about this in a couple weeks. Like there will be a team or two that starts in losers bracket that might go on a run, and I think it could be New York. I think it could be Florida. Like, I don't see it being Paris, but we might see some crazy losers bracket runs this year just with how competitive the whole league is. And that's honestly just super exciting to me. I wish we knew more about the layout. Like, you had mentioned, like, the 1 versus 8 loser, like, where do they go in losers bracket? That would be nice to know ahead of time. And maybe we get an announcement before the major. Also, yeah, is it a best of 9 finale or is it a best of 5 or is it 2 best of 5s if necessary? Like there's so many things that we still have, we need answers to.
The schedule too,
But
right? Because 18 games, you still can't split that up four ways. There's still more than that's like games a day plus two more games. So is that what, five on Saturday, five on Sunday? Like,
could be. I don't we'll see. It could be a jam pack. Yes, Sunday. Um I don't know. I'm super excited. We'll see how it plays out. Hopefully it's, better than last year's format. Not that last year's major formats were bad, but they could definitely use some improvement. So, yeah, just adding more matches, that's one of them. So, good job on that. We'll see how it plays out. We can talk about it more next week, but yeah, for now I think the winners bracket, losers bracket kind of plays out how we expect. I'll say teams that start in losers bracket, Paris obviously. I do think New York maybe go 0-2 this week and are in the basement there with them. And then it comes down to like who of Florida, Minnesota, Optic, maybe LAG fall down. I'll say Minnesota's in losers bracket. And yeah, Florida plays Seattle. Yeah, I'll say it's those four. I'll say Paris, New York, Florida, Minnesota, and yeah, tough stuff for them because I mean, honestly, Minnesota, Florida, New York, like they're good teams. It's a shame that like we have a losers bracket even because so many of these teams are what I think are still quality teams, but it's just how it is sometimes, and maybe their schedules get a little easier. I know we talked about before this stage even started. New York had a gauntlet of a schedule that they might not win a game from. Minnesota has a tough one where they might go 1-4. So maybe things turn around for them later this season or at the major. But yeah, we'll see. Obviously, a lot of COD to be played,
mhm.
and I'm looking forward to all of it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, just looking at some of these matches now. Again, they posted this 2 days ago. Their standings are wrong. They have Minnesota as the ninth team, Optic as the eighth team. We'll fix that for them. So right now the matchups would be FaZe versus Minnesota. That'd be the 1 versus 8. 2 versus 7 would be Seattle versus LAG. It'd be Ravens versus Thieves, and then Toronto versus it'd be Ultra versus Breach. Again, that's some great matches there. Actually, straight up. There's a lot of teams I'd take in those. I mean, obviously FaZe over Minnesota. But like just looking through like LAG versus Seattle, I would not put I would
Might be a really competitive match,
yeah,
like, we
like that
just
could go to
saw
five.
LAG.
That could go to five. Like
Yeah.
legitimately. Like again, LAG's had a lot of bad bounces too, and they're not dead. Like they're a team that I could see going on a long run in the bracket itself. Then you've got Ravens versus Thieves. Again, Ravens are the third seed. Thieves are the fifth seed or the sixth seed somehow. So, but that I could see Thieves will probably be the favorites there, but London could definitely upset them. I'd love to bet London against the Thieves. And then you've got Ultra versus Breach. Well, Ultra should be favored there, but that's a Method's revenge game, right? So I would not put that beyond like a. I would not be betting on Ultra against Methods. I think Methods will come out like and just that's a classic Methods revenge game. So like that, you could be looking. I can make a case for 3 out of the 4 winners bracket to be upsets, and then again, we have no idea who those teams are going to play after that. Again, good job CDL, but no, I mean, um, yeah, we're gonna have to. Yeah, it's gonna. There's some really interesting matchups going forward, and I think, obviously we have a. It's kind of annoying that we're gonna have a whole week off, but that's okay. We can fine tune models and then build stuff for that. But yeah, I'm excited to see where we're gonna go with this, and I think this year is kind of while there is some things that are still the chalk league, especially when you're looking at some of the top teams, everything else is not the chalk league anymore. Like when you're looking at the top 3 teams playing everybody else, it's the top chalk league. But and whenever someone's playing Paris, it's still the chalk league. But outside of that, a lot of these are very competitive. So I'm excited to see what we've got this week. Super excited. I'm already getting excited for the major. And yeah, that middle season is going to be fun too. There's going to be a Warzone tournament, and I'm actually really excited to see what we've got for the rest of this CDL season. So with that, I think that is good for this week. And yeah, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.